First of all, introducing our challenger.
Coming out of the blue corner.
He's going to step in and he does. It's all over.
Let's bring on the boom.
This is Eternal MMA.
It's a good word, mixed martial arts fans. Welcome back to another edition of the Eternal MMA Insiders podcast, fresh and rejuvenated for the year 2023. My name is Luke, and I'm back again with another special guest today. He's a man that was the 2022 Eternal MMA Fighter of the Year. He was formerly known as a Springbok, now evolved into Lockjaw. More commonly these days goes by the Eternal Featherweight Champion. Talking, of course, about Justin Van Heerden. Justin, how you doing today, brother? Thanks for joining me.
Good, man. Thanks for having me on. Excited that we're back doing these ones. You know, it's always cool to see that, you know, the more podcasts, the more sort of coverage of the sport, the better.
Yeah, of course, and we're glad to be back sort of doing it. And as I've said before, one of my favorite people to talk to. I've covered you a couple of times in the past, of course, so excellent to have you on the podcast. Unfortunately, today we start with a little bit of bad news in the fact that not only did we originally lose you for the Eternal 73 card, we also lost, just recently announced today, that we lost Rod Costa due to injury. So we have, in fact, lost the main event. So we do have a new main event now. It will be Steven Erceg versus his opponent, Soichiro Hirai, coming in from Japan to face him. So it's a little bit of a shake-up, but nonetheless, we're excited to press ahead to Eternal 73. What are your thoughts around that injury and what that means to the division, Justin? I mean, I know obviously you were disappointed to not get that fight yourself, but this sort of shakes everything up a little bit and sort of takes us a little bit back to square one. How do you see everything sort of playing out? Are there other players that could potentially come into the fold, or is this just sort of something we wait to see what happens in terms of maybe yours and Rod's injuries are coming to heal, and then maybe we do that one again?
Yeah, it's a weird situation now because obviously with me being injured, that kind of you know, put the brakes on the start of my year, and then now with Rod being injured and out of the fight, that they sort of salvaged an opponent for him and put that together. It sort of makes it a bit of a weird scenario because obviously I'm going to be cleared and good to go around mid-March, so that's going to tie me up sort of to start a camp and get going to fight in early May. That's the plan. With Rod, you know, who knows how long he's going to be out for with his injury or what that sort of means. But I think this changes things. Like had this fight gone ahead, obviously I'd be fighting the winner of Sam and Rod. That's pretty obvious. You know, Rod's putting his position at risk against the young up-and-comers, so it would have made sense to fight the winner of that fight. You know, with Rod being the bantamweight champion too, and now with this injury and being out, I mean, I guess the bantamweights that he's sort of got looming, they can't wait and sit around. And obviously, like you said, there's some other people in the featherweight division that are sort of in the same position. So the way I see it playing out now is it's just going to go off the winner of Philpott and Abdallah to see sort of what happens next. Because if Abdallah wins, it's pretty obvious he deserves a shot. The dude's on a tear. So that would make sense for me to defend my belt against Abdallah. So that'd be a pretty obvious challenger. If Allen wins, that kind of throws a spanner in the works again and creates some confusion because Allen will be 1-4 in his last 5 or 1-3 in his last 4, something like that. So, you know, coming off 3 back-to-back losses, then getting 1 win over a tough guy like Abdallah doesn't warrant enough for me for you to be able to fight for a belt. You got to get like another win. You know, if you get another win, then, you know, we can start talking about running back and doing a rematch. But that kind of leaves me in limbo, waiting for a clear number 1 contender in that scenario. Because I guess, what are your options? Do you do Diego and Allen as a rematch? Do you do Diego versus Alavi? Because Alavi's only lost as myself, and before that, you know, he's on a tear. Do you throw together Allen and Dimps? Because Dimps was going to drop down to featherweight and fight Alavi before that fight fell through. So I don't know. I feel like it's pretty clear what happens next. If Abdallah wins, I guess I'll defend my belt against him in May. If Allen wins, you know, wants to have a quick turnaround, fights in March, backs it up, gets another win, we can talk about that fight coming together for May. Then it would make more sense. But I guess if he wins outside of this win over Abdallah, I think he's just lacking in the criteria to be able to sort of come back and fight for a title. I mean, I had to string together a few wins back to back and a few finishes over some top ranked guys. I think it's only fair that someone sort of cements their claim. And right now, the only person that I can see doing that is someone like Rod Costa, someone like Abdallah. You know, these guys are just taking fights, getting after it, separating themselves from the fold. yeah, it's a very, very confusing sort of outcome. This fight falling through with myself and Rod both getting injured, but yeah, I guess I'll just wait and see what happens on the weekend. I think a lot of sort of clarity is going to come from the result of the Abdallah and Philpott fight once we know, and then obviously once we know the nature of Rod's injury and how long it's going to be that he might be on the shelf for as well.
Yeah, of course, Abdallah Baeta versus Alan Philpott fighting on Eternal 73, one of the fights we still do have there. When you look at those two combatants, is there anyone in particular you like in that matchup when you see their skills get put together?
Looking at the fight, there's a strong case that Alan has the tools to dismantle Abdallah in that fight. Obviously, Abdallah prefers to get his work done on the feet and use his striking, use his reach. He's very dangerous, got all the weapons, the knees, the elbows, the kicks, the punches. Dude's very talented, very long, very hard to deal with. Very big for the weight class. But outside of that, I feel like, Alan's obviously got a lot more tools as a whole, as a well-rounded sort of fighter. If you look at the fight with Diego, that's sort of proof in the pudding that he went away and worked on the wrestling, worked on the grappling. He was able to ragdoll Diego around for that entire fight in all areas, the striking, the grappling, the wrestling, and then obviously made one mistake and got caught with a submission. So, if you're looking at it like that, and he's obviously super experienced, dude's had like 50 MMA fights. He's training with some killers at Igor MMA. He's constantly working with someone like Josh Kulabau, getting high quality rounds in. So I don't know. It's an interesting matchup. It's going to be interesting to see how the wrestling plays a factor for me, because both guys like to be long and use their range. Alan is a counter fighter. He relies on you coming forward, being sucked into his game, and then he'll counter with combinations. He'll throw 3-4 punch kick combinations. Abdallah, someone who likes to keep you at the end of his punches, uses reach. So they're both like being fighting on the back foot, but for different reasons. So it's just we're just gonna have to see how Alan dictates the wrestling in this fight and those grappling exchanges, and just wears on Abdallah a bit. Because I think in a just a straight up kickboxing fight, if they're just standing there, getting their work done on the feet, it's going to be interesting. Both guys are obviously very talented in that area. And like I said, Alan's counter striking, I can speak to it firsthand, having already fought him. He's got good striking and good counter striking. If you play into his game and, sort of allow him to just sit on the back foot and do his work, he's going to piece you up. But, he kind of can't do that with someone like Abdallah. He can't just sit back and wait, because Abdallah can just jab him from the outside. He can hit you, but you can't hit him. You kind of have to push in on him, have to push forward. So I think that's going to be a telling sort of part of this fight. But looking at it, breaking it down, I'm leaning towards Philpott to come back and get it done. I think the dude seems hungry. He's obviously got a chip on his shoulder like he always does. Being as experienced as he is, being as talented as he is, coming off 3 losses, the dude's going to want to right the ship, get back on track. So do I think it's going to be a cakewalk? Absolutely not. This is going to be a scrap, and it's going to be very technical over the 3 rounds. But ultimately, I think Alan's going to have enough to get it done, especially if he can really mix it up and dictate the exchanges with the wrestling.
And of course, we know, from the previous matchup that you had with Alan Philpott, there was some interesting words sort of exchanged in the lead up to there, and then some respect obviously shown after that, both on social media and in person. But you've got to imagine that when Alan sort of took that loss to you, he sort of gets this win against Abdallah. You've got to imagine that he's going to be sort of calling his shot. Not only would he like to get that featherweight belt, but you have to think that he would like to get that win back over yourself, no? Yeah,
100%. I think you kind of set yourself up with that fight. Like that's the risk you take. Like obviously the banter, the trash talk and that's all part of the sport. But then when you push it to a certain point, the risk for reward kind of starts to dwindle a bit. And with Alan, he took it to a point where you just set yourself up where it was like, you have to go out there and win, and not only win, you have to come out there and finish me. And he was unable to do that. And, I was able to capitalize. I was able to put him away. So obviously that would have stung a fair bit. And I feel like that's what motivated him to do the work that he did. Because obviously when he came into that fight with Diego, as I said, outside of that one mistake, dropping for a guillotine and giving up position, he was piecing Diego up. So yeah, I think he's going to be hungry to get a rematch. Obviously, he wants to try and win a title. So yeah, it's gonna make sense that he goes out there on the weekend, capitalizes, gets a win, and then gets on the mic, immediately calls to fight with me, tries to sell that in any way he can, as he should. And, you know, I've already fought the guy, I've already beat the guy. I have no issue with fighting him again. Obviously, I'll fight anyone. You put someone in front of me, I'll fight him. But at the end of the day, too, it's got to make sense, right? I'm so big and so set on making myself undeniable and taking the fights and doing the things to earn my spot and keep my spot and, you know, cement that. So if I'm going to do that, if I'm going to carry myself like that, it's only right that they hold these guys to the same standards. So regardless if Alan wins and regardless if he gets a finish on the weekend, you got to get another win. You got to do something. You got to string together some momentum so that we can put this together. Because I think ultimately that's going to make the fight bigger if it does happen again. And a way to do that is to do what I did. Get on the mic, call your shot, say that you want to fight in March, call out someone, take a fight, get in there, you know, call for that. And then, you know, then you're going to set yourself up pretty nicely to have a big rematch with me in May if you do something like that. You know, and that's a fight that sells out easily. I don't know, people, you know, if people paid attention the last time we fought, if you heard the crowd in there, like we had supporters stacked in the Gold Coast, and we're both guys that are based in Sydney. So, you know, it's going to sell some tickets. Cam and Ben are going to be happy, and it's going to create a big event if we can put together a rematch like that. But ultimately, right now, the way it stands, it would make more sense for me to fight Diego again than it would to fight Alan.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting prospect, no matter where you sort of look at it. You know, interesting times, you know, given the injuries we sort of had and how it's sort of waiting to have to see like what pieces sort of fall into place. And of course, we need to get yourself back in the cage as well, back from your injury. I know you sort of touched on it before about your timeline, but for the fans that don't know, what can you tell us about sort of how the injury happened, where you are on sort of the timeline, how it's healing, how you're personally feeling, and where you sort of see yourself coming back going forward?
Yeah, so obviously it's been probably about a month now since I sustained the injury. I broke my metatarsal on my right foot. So yeah, it was a case of trying to work out what the best option is going to be recovery-wise moving forward. Is surgery needed? Is it not? Thankfully, surgery wasn't needed. So it's just a case of just playing the waiting game, being diligent with the recovery and just doing the right things. But I'm on track, and I feel like the timeline that I've been given, I'm going to be, you know, on track to sort of meet that and be able to get back to work when I'm sort of from what I'm aiming to with the team I have around me. So that's looking like it's going to be, you know, around mid-March. That sets me up nicely to get back into training, get stuck in, and then start a camp and prepare for May. So I said to, you know, Cam, I'll be good to go for May. I don't see any reason why I won't be. That's like the absolute latest sort of timeline that we're going off. You know, it could be faster than that. I could, you know, it could be a case of a couple of weeks from now, I go and get a scan done, go get a check done, and they tell me that it's good to go. And then, you know, I start easing in a bit sooner than that. So we'll see, but I'm pretty confident it's going to come together, that the timeline's going to match how it is now, and I'll be fighting in May.
Yeah, and of course, we look forward to your return. You know, obviously, we would have loved to have seen you on that card at Eternal 73 and missing Rod Costa now, of course, but still a lot to like on this card. Of course, we see the return of Steven Erceg against his opponent coming in from Japan. Have you had a bit of a chance to have a look at that fight? I know you're a big fan of the sport. I know you follow everything locally as well as internationally. You know, when you sort of look at that as the main event, what Steven's been able to achieve in his career and what he hopes to achieve in his career, when you sort of look at that matchup, is that something that excites you to see something like that from the flyweights?
Yeah, 100%. I like watching the flyweight fights. You know, they're so technical. The guys are so explosive. They're so fast. They're just good everywhere. More often than not, you know, the flyweights are all well-rounded because they kind of have to be. You're the smallest person in the gym at any given time. So, you know, you kind of, the technique side of things is going to always excel and be at a high level because you kind of have to. You don't have the size, the strength advantage. You got speed and you got your technique. So this is going to be a sort of similar sort of thing when we look at this fight. I feel like it's going to be two guys who are very fast, very explosive, very technical, very well-rounded, that are just going to get in there and put on a show. But ultimately, I just think Steven's just going to come out there and you know, dismantle his opponent. He's just, the dude's on another level. He's very, very talented. And obviously, he should have had his chance to fight on Contender Series and earn a contract for the UFC. I think there's going to be, you know, big things for that guy regardless coming forward. You know, a win here kind of cements that yet again, that he deserves to have a shot at the big leagues in some capacity. So I feel like that's what we're going to see. And I feel like he's going to be hungry to do that. Fight in his hometown, fight in front of his friends and family, put on an absolute show, come out there, secure a finish inside 2 rounds. and then walk away knowing that he's, the number one person in the region in his weight class, which he already is. And then, yeah, you're setting yourself up for a potential contender series or UFC call up or, whatever sort of next step you want to take.
Yeah, of course, being the Perth boy that he is, a lot of people are keen to see him back. Big hometown favourite there. A lot happening in Perth that week, and of course, not only Eternal 73, but UFC 284 going there too. A man that you're more than familiar with, a guy sitting at the top of the bill. Of course, Alexander Volkanovski looking to capture a second belt when he goes to the lightweight championship against Islam Makhachev. This is a man that you know very intimately because you're one of his main training partners. You're training at Freestyle MMA. Give us a bit of insight into what the vibe is like around Freestyle MMA at the moment. Of course, a lot of buzz. I'm assuming we're getting so close to that fight now. What's it sort of like around the gym right
now? Confident. There's a confidence about it, about Volk and about the gym and about just everything in general, just because of the hard work that was done and is always done. He's more than ready to go out there and fight for 25 minutes or take the challenges that are going to be presented for however long the fight goes. But yeah, ultimately, I do believe Volk's going to go out there. He's going to be able to secure a finish, put Islam away, cement himself as pretty much the greatest mixed martial artist we've seen in the sport. Keep his place as pound for pound number one, and achieve that sort of double champ status. Kind of separating yourself even more from the rest of the people in the sport and the rest of the sort of champions in the sport. Because I think if he wins this fight against Islam, which I'm very confident he's gonna, outside of that, the only person that's coming close that could challenge for the mantle of pound for pound number one and the greatest of all time is someone like John Jones if he goes out there and wins the second title at heavyweight. So it's kind of this big stakes here. There's legacy, there's all these things involved, but stylistically the matchup's intriguing because Islam's been knocked the fuck out. I think people forget that he's been knocked out. And with someone like Volk, if you're going to give him the opportunities to touch your chin, he's going to put you away. He's going to put you away violently. If you look at it and you look at the fights that he's had recently, fight to fight, the improvements he's made and how good he looks and what he was able to do to someone like Holloway, let's call it like it is. A lot of people are talking about the wrestling and the grappling that Islam possesses. Well, you don't have the striking ability and the fight IQ to deal with what Volk presents you as a whole as a mixed martial artist. You just don't. If he's able to piece up someone like Max Holloway on the feet, what do you think he's going to do to you? If you look at Volk's sort of run in previous fights, other times he's fought southpaws, he's just dismantled them, just beat the shit out of them. So I think there's a lot of things that play into Volk's favor. Obviously, the grappling and the wrestling with Islam's a big strength of his and something you got to worry about and deal with. But that's going to go out the window after round one. Round one's the best chance for that to be successful. The rounds 2, 3, 4, as it keeps going, then I feel like we're going to see Islam break mentally. He's not going to be able to secure takedowns. He's not going to be able to secure control. And the whole time, it doesn't matter if it's 30 seconds or 3 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes. The longer that fight's on the feet, the more pain and suffering he's going to experience at the end of it. And I, from my own sort of time in the sport, I can tell you, someone who likes to grapple and wrestle, as well, if someone shuts down you trying to take them down, or they're able to scramble back to their feet, it's hard to keep that, your foot on the pedal and keep going. Does Islam have the ability to push through and grapple and wrestle for 25 minutes? Of course he does. Has he ever had to do it when he's losing? Not yet. He's just come in and grabbed a hold of people and just taken them out completely. So it's going to be interesting to see how that little adjustment takes place. But ultimately, I think Volk's going to put him away in the fourth round of the knockout.
Yeah, in terms of the significance of what this means to Australia, it can't really sort of be overstated, right? Having an event, in the regional scene, the biggest promotion in Australia in Eternal MMA the night before UFC 284, with everything that's on the line and with the amount of Australians that we have, fighting on this card, ex-Eternal MMA fighters, Alexander Volkanovski, a man you train with, the current featherweight champion of the world, looking to really cement that number one pound for pound status. Obviously, he already holds that already, but then looking at going up and achieving something like becoming another one of the very few people to hold another belt at the same time, to be a dual title holder. Like, where do you think this ranks in significance in terms of what it means to Australia as an MMA sporting nation?
It'd certainly be one of the biggest sporting accomplishments not just mixed martial arts wise. I think just across the board that we've seen any Australian go out and achieve. And I feel like it's just continued on from what he's already been able to do. He's already made history. He's already put himself in such a lofty position, and he's just going to keep continue to do that. And that's big for Australian MMA as a whole, man. Like how many people, how many amateurs, how many fighters, how many people are going to start doing the sport, looking up to him, going, man, if this guy from a little town in New South Wales can come and do this, like go out there and fight in the UFC and be the best fighter on planet Earth, like what can I do? Like what's going to happen if I pursue my dream and chase the sport? So I feel like it's going to be incredible, and it's going to add to the reason why you see the talent rising so much from the amateurs all the way to the pros in the regional scene. And then obviously with the success of the Anzacs that we're seeing in the top levels of the sport across the board, whether it's in the UFC, PFL, Bellator, etc. So it's a massive, massive moment, and it's a massive leap forward for the sport of MMA that this card's taking place, and that Eternal's taking place the night before. But it's going to be even crazier to see the outcome of this once Volk goes in there and does his job, because it's going to rise everyone else up the same way. I think every single person that's a fighter, especially that's based here in Australia, and that we're all sort of looking at, he's leading from the front for many people, not just me as a teammate of his and someone that's close to him. I think everyone looks at him and goes, holy shit, man, like this dude is paving the way for us. Like, let's try and emulate that. Someone like him, someone like Rob Whittaker, these are the people that you want to sort of, I guess, develop yourself after. They got all the qualities, they got, the skills, the abilities, the hard work, but just how they carry themselves, they carry themselves as champions in every sort of other aspect as well. And I think that's huge for the sport and huge for the up and comers and the amateurs and everyone as a whole.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with everything you said there, Justin. And from my opinion, I'm sure from everyone else's opinion, doesn't get the recognition that he deserves in Australia in terms of the mainstream media. So we'll do our little part here, but he's got to do what you sort of said. He's got to make himself undeniable in that regard, and he's already sort of done that at an international level. And we need to start, really shining that light here from a mainstream perspective. And hopefully, a win like this, something that's going to have eyeballs around the world, certainly elevates him to sort of that next level. Because as we said, the implications here and what's sort of on the line certainly can't be overstated. You've always got fantastic insight there, Justin, too, especially, given that you train so close with Volk. We can't obviously wait to have you back in the cage. Eternal 73 still going down. We've lost the main event, of course, but still a lot to like in terms of having Steven Erceg versus Soichiro Hirai in the flyweight division. I know you're going to be watching, Justin. You're a massive fan of the sport, as you've told me, both internationally and watching locally. So thank you very much for joining me again. We can't wait to see you back in, and we look forward to having you back on the show again sometime soon, Justin. Pleasure as always, brother.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Always enjoy coming on.
All the best, man. Thank you.